Welcome to Next Time Around, brought to you by Powerverse, the podcast where we take on the big questions of the green transition and explore how the world is changing for a cleaner, brighter future. We're your hosts, Lauren Forster
and Richard Britton,
and we'll be diving into the tech, the policies and the big ideas that are reshaping industries and people's lives. Whether it's cutting-edge technology or shifting priorities, we're here to figure out what it all means for you and the world that we're building for tomorrow. So get ready as we take a fresh look at how changes today are laying the groundwork for a better next time around. We have an Olympic gold medalist, London 2012 ambassador and software sales leader. We'll be discussing sustainability in sport, his Olympic journey and how software can help improve efficiency in business. Welcome, Rowley Douglas MBE. Rowley's currently in New York, so let's join him now.
Hi, my name is Rowley Douglas. I am a British Olympic champion from the year 2000 and also now work in the software industry. You can pick which one of those two you think I cling on to as my greatest accolade. So I've had pretty good experience with enterprise organizations and how they select and then ultimately adopt and hopefully gain efficiencies and benefits from the software platforms that they use.
Welcome, Rowley. Thanks very much for joining us and great to have you on the podcast. So maybe you could start by telling us a little bit more about that tantalizing point you made about representing your country, because that's kind of understating it a little, isn't it? And we'd love to hear the story.
I won't say it's one of those romantic stories where I once watched Daley Thompson or someone win an Olympic gold medal and decided one day that was going to be me. Really, it's just a love of the water. So even though I did love athletics and rugby and cricket and hockey and all that kind of stuff, certainly at least rugby, all the other kids got really big really quickly and I didn't. So I retained my 5'8" frame, which isn't really designed for rugby. And I went down to the water and just started learning how to do this rowing thing. It didn't take long before the coach had come to the same conclusion as the rugby coaches, which is that I also wasn't built for pulling on an oar, apparently. So they found the other seat at the back of the boat for me, which was the coxswain, who steers the boat and is like having a coach on board. So that's the role that I ended up kind of falling into. We won a few races and I always was looking for what's the next race that I might be able to win. And that led me to go to Oxford Brookes University. I was there at the beginning of this ride with people who were all on the periphery of the British team. And that was exciting to be around people like that because you inevitably get carried along by their aspirations and their standards. And I quickly began to realize that, there could be something better for me out there if I put that amount of training in and had that level of ambition. And eventually that led to trying to crack my way into the British rowing team. In 1999, I was given the ability to trial for 2 weeks with the British Men's 8, which is the only boat that has a coxswain in it at the Olympics. And that 2-week trial resulted in a race at the end of it. And they made a judgment based on that, which resulted in me being selected for the position of cox. We went to the World Championships that year and we got a silver medal. And that's the first time in 20 plus years a British 8 had even got a medal of any colour. And we had just this serious inner belief that we were on an upward trajectory to being genuine contenders for the next year for an Olympic gold. And we believed that irrespective of what all sorts of naysayers and people outside the boat had to say. We went into the Olympics the next year, and that's the background to the journey.
It's incredible. What a journey. I think it was really interesting what you said about that competitive mindset and the belief that you need to be able to get to there. 1 in 1.14 million people have won a gold medal, which is a great stat to be able to roll around with.
It is, yeah. It's probably one of those things that it's good to hear afterwards. I think there has to be a certain amount of ignorance to what you're attempting to achieve in order to let you get there.
And there's a very interesting parallel in that for all of the things that, we're trying to achieve and the world's trying to achieve actually right now, which is shifting, frankly, everything we do from one economy to another one with no carbon involved and doing it all in about 20 years so that we don't get into an even greater climate crisis. So a slightly unfair question, what do you think culturally and value-wise are the right things for the change agents making this shift happen, that 1 in a million opportunity for change to be a success?
I think one of the problems we've got right now is getting people to understand and buy into what happens if we don't do this, which is kind of one of those questions we would ask in sales, right? If you guys do nothing, what's going to happen? And unfortunately, with the era of mass disinformation. And there seems to be too much of that out there right now for people to really understand what the problems are and who should they listen to and who should they believe. I'm not an expert in how to get people in on the ride, but I think finding those types of change agents and getting them to spread the message in a way that people want to engage with, that to me is how you'll kind of build that groundswell up from the bottom.
Fascinating. Thank you. That's really helpful to get that perspective. I suppose we're both sitting here really keen to hear about the year 2000. So you were in the boat in 99, you got the silver, then you got the tap on the shoulder and you're in the boat in 2000. Talk us through winning the Olympic gold medal.
To take one of the commentators' remarks, from pillar to post, we were never led. So it's very easy to look at a race like that and go, oh, those guys were the best. The journey to winning it was littered with mistakes and catastrophes of our own making. See failure as part of the journey to success and to therefore embrace it, push the boundaries, make things fail, make things break as part of the process. It was just, again, accepting that and trying to figure out how do we improve. What did we learn from that failure? The first round of the Olympics, we got beaten, not by a huge margin. And it was probably the best thing that happened to us because we left the UK and we were flying and we were feeling good. We got down to Australia and everything went upside down and we just couldn't seem to make the boat go fast anymore. And then people became a bit insular. You put your own defenses up and you start worrying about your own self. And I think that was a big problem for us. We're a team sport, crew sport. You can't be worrying about yourself. You got to be worrying about the person in front of you, the person behind you, the group, the people outside the boat who are part of the team. And so we got beaten in that first round. I was sent out on the water to get someone to be angry. So we went out to do this exercise called power strokes, where 2 guys are rowing, so they're carrying the boat, me and 6 other guys. Then you join in 2 guys, then you join in 2 guys. It's rough. It's meant to be rough because it's just about maximum power down. So we got back in our own bubble and we started affecting our own change. And at that point, we were really boiling the rowing lake and people were on fire. And then we went out the next day, gave everyone a good thrashing in the repechage race, which meant we qualified for the final. At this point, tails are up and we're on a roll, but you got to bring it down a little bit now because there's still 2 days to go. So we cooled it off a little bit, carried on our training, didn't lose sight of that, kept putting things in the box that, made us angry or whatever to bring out when we needed to. The next day, our coach said many years later that the first stroke he saw us take off the dock, he turned around and said they've won and walked off. Within 2 or 3 strokes off the start, I stopped looking at the Cox box, which gives data on boat speed and things like that, because I didn't feel there was any need to be looking at numbers anymore. We all had a feel for what we could do, what was within ourselves, what was boat speed that was attainable and maintainable, and we were doing that, and I didn't feel that there was any way anyone was coming past us at that juncture. Our now departed assistant coach Harry Mahon, who was kind of known as Obi-Wan Kenobi, he was a bit of a boat whisperer. He died shortly afterwards of bowel cancer, and my view to the guys was, we've just got to get this 60-foot piece of plastic to the finish line in front of everybody else. He's fighting every day just to keep his eyes open so he can watch this race. And to quote Harry's words, the ambulances will be waiting for you at the finish line. And I think that was kind of breaking the dial from 10 to whatever number you wanted it to be. I love the shot across the rowing lake from the cameras at 250 meters. It's always a great shot because you've got 6 boats with 9 people in them, all going in different directions because of where they are in the stroke pattern. And it's noise and energy and excitement, and we're not in it because we're already out in front, which I love. We're going for the gold medal. You guys can chase us and see who gets the silver. That was the attitude that we took towards it. The guy who sat in front of me, Steve Trapmore, so he's gone full circle from being in the 8 to coaching it, which I think is pretty amazing. I don't know how many, you can find that stat out. That's got to be an even thinner number of people who've achieved that.
That's an incredible achievement, especially coming back from underdogs to win. So Rowley, you've had some experience in the Olympics in another way. Would you be able to share how you were involved with London 2012 and how the Olympics have changed in terms of sustainability?
I think by the London 2012 delivery team, this is to building a more sustainable games. I'm by no means an expert in this and did not work for them, but I was privileged to see some of the things that happened. And I think they made an enormous effort to think through what next when the torch goes out and everyone's drunk an awful lot of Olympic Kool-Aid. What you don't want is a whole load of erroneous venues floating around because they cost a fortune to put in, and not just in expenditure, but the energy, literal energy to build things, concrete and production and all sorts. And the venues at London, they very much thought it through that these are going to be in a location built for use afterwards. And they are still with huge utilization. Post-games utilization was critical. They're not the first, and I'm glad they won't be the last to have made sure that the village will provide housing, increased housing in the area. I believe that a lot of the finance arrangements for Tokyo were contingent on, these properties already being forward sold to allow. So London did a great job of that. I think the aquatics venue is heavily utilized by the local community. And probably one of the best things they did was, I believe that the whole Olympic Park complex where the stadium is and the aquatic center, velodrome, the central hub or heart of the Olympics, that is the biggest outdoor park to be built in Europe for 150 years. And they converted all of that into what is now a really pretty mature grassland and meadowland and outdoor space in an urban area.
I can't say that my football knowledge is particularly good, so please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the Olympic Stadium's West Ham's official stadium,
yes, so
it's actually in permanent use, which is great to see.
And I think it's multi-use. It's their home ground, which is obviously fantastic because that's a Premiership football club, so they're going to be playing a lot of matches there, especially if they get into European leagues, that's even more matches. But I believe that they still have the athletics track available for use so that they can host Grand Prix meetings there for the athletics federations as well, which is critical.
So some really interesting insights there about creating venues that are multifunctional and have a lifetime after the games. Let's hope that notion of creating infrastructure that's multi-purpose and therefore avoids having to invest in the more concrete, more steel paradigm that you're talking about is one that we see more and more of as we try and get to a more sustainable way of living. Moving you on then to get your opinion on the most recent games, and you've touched on knowing some of the people at that games as athletes and competitors there in the rowing 8. There was a lot written in the press about the accommodation and the beds, I think, were made out of cardboard. Did you hear anything about that?
I haven't heard anything specific about it, I guess, more than some of the
viral content.
I was going to say the newspapers kind of covered it in two ways. There was they're environmentally friendly beds made of cardboard, and then there was the sort of lewder side of what people suggested the beds were designed not to allow to happen. Yeah. So I don't have a kind of insight directly into that, but in my own experience in Sydney was they had built these really what I would just call great townhouses for the village, and you would get into it and it was very obvious that it had been divided into levels and for purposes of the games, and then there were effectively something a little bit better than a cardboard wall dividing each floor up into rooms of 2. And that was all by design, forward thinking that this will all be easily removable to then create the floor plan that a modern family would want. So we quickly get from the games to the people we've already sold this to moving into it. And I think that's what many of these venues are trying to do when they build these, because you're talking 10,000 people potentially. Right, so it's a lot of people suddenly in an area. You've got to think smart about how you construct that for them and for then the number of people you want to be in there and be serviced to live in a location like that, from transport and all that kind of stuff.
From talking to you outside of the podcast today, I know you're a bit of an F1 fan, and I know Lauren is as well. So I'm going to set this one up, Lauren. Go for it. What do you want to talk to Rowley about on the F1 front?
Well, I'd love to talk to you about a lot, but to keep it relevant here, it would be great to get your thoughts on what you think Sebastian Vettel is doing to improve Formula One and making it a cleaner sport.
I haven't read in detail a lot of the things he's doing, but I am aware of it because he also made it clear when he was still in the sport, which I thought was fantastic. Let's face it, it is a kind of high-octane, guzzling sport, and that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be trying to push the boundaries. Because Formula One's always been a really good example for me of the trickle-down effect of the technology, right? Because it finds its way into vehicles, whether it be the Kerr's regenerative braking systems or safety systems, fuel efficiency. So making what we have work more efficiently, so we are burning less fossil fuel, is good for the environment, is cheaper for those organizations to manage, as well as we try and transition to maybe a hybrid solution, or ultimately maybe a completely renewable solution. The sport of Formula One is definitely driving software technology, mechanical engineering technology, aerodynamics, et cetera. And I think where Vettel's going with it is, you can do what you want when you finish, right? But I'd much rather see someone going the path he's leading to raise awareness that we need to make sports more sustainable than just becoming an after dinner speaker, right? And telling some funny stories.
Absolutely. You alluded to it earlier. It's like positively influencing where you can. So rather than going away, taking his millions, it's actually saying, let's stay in the sport and impact it in another way. So whether that is creating new technologies, or actually saying the F1 schedule is all over the place because you're flying from South America.
And you get more races than ever before this year as well, right? So.
Exactly. How can you have all of the American races the following week so that you don't have to fly the cars back and forth over the world?
And I believe that there's been some talk about that around Olympics and around FIFA not allowing multiple countries to say, we're going to host it, because then people are flying all over the place trying to get to these things, and try and center the venues, where possible. To your point there, we don't need to go to Austin Grand Prix one week and then Monaco the next and then back again to Las Vegas. That's just madness. The topic of athletes using their platform to do something great. He is doing it within the sport that he loves to get the message out. So it's very relevant, right? He is a racing car driver, loves automobile sports. So he's talking to his people and hopefully bringing more in through the use of the sport to do it.
I think that conversation about Sebastian Vettel and the changes in Olympic sport and in Formula One are really interesting, because they kind of highlight that things don't change overnight and Rome wasn't built in a day. I think all of these things point to really interesting opportunities to just get better at the things we do now, be more sustainable, be more efficient, use less carbon, work out how to make things have a life after their first life, work out how to optimize, because ultimately, we can't second guess the technology that's going to be around in 2050 to help eventually completely solve the climate crisis, but we can look at these transitional steps. And I think all the stuff that you've talked about there is really fascinating as an element of the solution. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. And also to your point about we don't have to go to multiple countries in different places when the scheduling could be improved. The same is true with work, but it required a global pandemic for us to figure out how to use video conferencing. There's got to be a bit of the team camaraderie that can only really come from being in the room together. But there was this huge thing about you've got to have face-to-face meetings. And I think I fully buy into that. To me, people buy from people. I know it's old and cliche, but you don't really get the measure of a person until they're standing with you. And a lot of what they're buying into is the person and the company that they represent, that they will be there when the bumps are there to help them evolve the software, or to fix a bug or whatever it might be, right? Because this is their business that's now being affected. Their revenue might have stopped if the software is revenue adjacent. I think you build that trust from in person. So the pandemic kind of taught us all that we can achieve an awful lot through the technology by leveraging it. But I think in my mind, it also taught us that there is a huge importance of face-to-face interactions, because suddenly we were not allowed to do those at all. And you had to learn how to communicate and sell with your phone only or with your video conference only. So I kind of digressed a little bit, but I think that is worth mentioning on top of the kind of point that was being made around what Formula One are doing.
That's really good.
Okay, so Rowley, you've told us about your experience within the software industry. How do you think that software can be used to help industries transform, especially those experiencing the climate crisis?
So I think from my view, from a sales point of view, I feel like buyers buy with their eyes, and for the most part. So if you don't have a good UI UX, you're going to struggle to sell whatever amazing thing sits underneath the bonnet. The good UI UX that the buyer buys into is because without that, the customer's experience, or it might be that the customer is like an internal user in a big corporation, right? That might it's B2B software, or if it's B2C software, it doesn't matter. If the user isn't finding the experience seamless and easy to do the thing that the software is supposedly allowing them to do, it becomes shelfware, in which case the whole thing was a waste of time in the first place. So I think that's definitely putting the customer first, but I kind of did so by way of how you're selling it in the first place. The second thing I would say is, which really helps feed into the user experience, but I think it has to have really good scalability and flexibility with high quality APIs to allow it to talk to a whole load of different systems to either bring in data to enrich the experience or bring in other services that enhance the experience for the end user, so that you're reducing multiple clicks to get where you want to go. So that ability, I think, is critical to allow the software then to evolve, to continue to meet the needs. And like I said, importantly is people talk about future-proofing and things like that, right? But if you're building it with a view to make it easy for the developers to continue developing it for the changing market that they're in, I think that will ultimately serve the customers. And if you're serving the customers well and quickly able to give them what they want from their experience, I think that will be critical to the platform.
That was very helpful. Thank you, Rowley, and some really good insights there around having the right experience for the customer and the right way of being able to distribute the capability through APIs out to other systems and so on can really make a difference in terms of the way that software is adopted and helps to transform businesses. Maybe you can give us an example of where, in your experience, you've seen an industry in a sort of slightly tired place where there's a big need for change, and then how putting some new software in has helped to really take it to operate with new business model, because that's what we think is happening through the green transition, that whole new business models are being invented and empowered. So I'd be interested in your opinion on that.
I look at when we used to sell to telecommunications companies, they got to the point of worrying about cord cutters and how do they access this market and sell them what they want. But actually, the market shifted to cord nevers. My kids, they don't have a concept of television, scheduled television, because they don't even know what the basic channels are. That means nothing to them because they're consuming their media through YouTube and Netflix. So they are true cord nevers, right? And the big communications companies who have all the backbone and infrastructure couldn't figure out how to serve those people well. And I think the software layer ultimately ended up helping to bring the right product mix in a way that they wanted to consume it. Nowadays, it has to be mobile because you only have to walk around looking at everyone staring at their handsets. It has to be consumable in the way and the place that the modern buyer wants to consume it. So I think I'm not an expert on the energy industry, but that's going through a transformation as well. And I'm looking often at some of the things I've got at my end when they slightly gamify things and they tell you how much you have saved in energy units by doing X, Y, and Z. That to me is bringing me through data into the journey. So I go, oh, right, okay. Even if I don't care about the environment, I'm saving money doing this and it's good for the environment. So why wouldn't I do this thing? So software layers that bring in the entire mix of energy, which now also includes electric vehicles that you're using. So I have one central place I go that is my dashboard as a consumer that tells me what I'm doing and how I can change it and what impact that's having. And I can get down to some fairly granular levels if I want. I can see where my solar energy came from. It's a matter of bringing the user that experience and getting them immersed in it so they start going, actually, I'm buying into this and I'm kind of more interested and engaged in the thing now in this way that I can see. I can draw a straight line between the two because the software is allowing me to see that in a visual way. So you bring this whole mix of different EV type products into it and my dashboard of energy consumption and where it came from and what it means. And the same, can you imagine that with a business? You've got a global business and you're in charge of making it efficient. And you've got a dashboard of the 10 sites across the UK, the 15 across the United States, the 4 in the Middle East. And you're able to take a look at how they're consuming energy, when the shifts are in there, when they're not. Why are we blowing through energy when there's no one working? That becomes actually kind of pretty interesting. And then you're back to the Formula One of how, they're just amazing at looking at pouring through data to figure out how to make their car go faster than the others. And that's now you're empowering a site manager to make their site, they are the driver now. We used to have a saying in the Olympic Gate, and it was, will it make the boat go faster? What can I reduce and what can I increase? And what is having no effect, so I can just leave it as it is, to make decisions that will actually save this company tons of money if you're talking about that scale of now data coming in. He or she's making a small change, but it's global to an organization that's translating into big numbers in dollars and cents saving.
Thank you for setting out a bit of a picture there for us as what, good energy software could do to transform its customers, but also the businesses that are in this industry that we're so focused on. And I loved the example you gave of the cable companies, the service providers in the UK. We've got sort of BT and Sky, who for a long time made lots of money out of selling broadband connections, setting up people's internet connections. And then you're right, now actually those businesses make their money by aggregating services in the software layer, which is why you can get all of the different services, Netflix and Paramount, and you can see energy probably going that same way of an aggregation of different services that the consumers can select from, or as you say, businesses can select from, and sort of driving ever increasing and faster change. So thank you for a little walkthrough of your thoughts on that, Rowley.
So we have one final question for you. We would love to know whether you value your Olympic gold medal or your MBE the most.
I'll throw one in that's linked to the answer, but is more important, which is crossing the finish line first is what I value the most. With the 8 guys that were in front of me, having done what we set out to do, not letting anyone down, and that feeling, a confluence of feelings of anger at the opposition for making you race so hard, but love for your competitors, excitement, jubilation, relief. You didn't train to get a gold medal. You trained to cross the finish line first. And there's a moment when the rest of the world haven't finished yet, and that's awesome. The gold medal is obviously a remarkable keepsake of that, I guess. And the MBE was an absolute privilege to be awarded, but it doesn't even come close because that was granted to us for doing something which makes me very proud that they've thought to do that.
Thank you very much for being on Next Time Around. It's been fantastic to talk to you about your Olympic gold medal journey and also to get your insights on sustainable initiatives that are happening within sports. It's been so lovely to have you here.
Thank you. I really appreciate being on the show today. Some interesting questions, and it certainly forced me to start thinking a little bit about the engagement aspect of things. So I've enjoyed being here.
And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Next Time Around. We've really enjoyed discussing sustainability in sport and how software can improve energy consumption and efficiency within business. We hope it's given you something to think about. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and search Powerverse, or share it with someone who you think might find it interesting and helpful. To find out more about our software, visit our website www.powerverse.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time.